He said, sorry, but I asked my dad. It don't exist.
Well, you know what I wonder, because, you know, if you're a bootleg collector like me, there is a lot of pro shot footage out there that was sourced from the Houston Summit and from Largo, Maryland,
Yeah,
from the house camera system.
Yeah, 82.
So what's that?
82, yeah.
80, yeah, the 82 footage. So I mean, I have a lot of Kiss stuff, and like I have like some Journey stuff and some Stick stuff from those two venues. So those venues, the house system filmed the bands as far back as I think like 75 at Capitol Center in Largo. Mm-hmm. And Houston, I know as far back as I think 76. There's some Cheap Trick stuff, like stuff that's leaked out, bootlegs. Mm-hmm. And from what I understand is that the arenas would broadcast the show on the Arena Vision, and they would offer the band the opportunity to buy the tape of the show. Okay. And some bands declined, and some bands would purchase a copy of, or like on a Betamax or whatever, and they would, I guess, get the rights to use the footage if they purchased the tape from the arena. But what I want to know is there some warehouse or some office somewhere that has all of these shows that these arenas taped that were never, they're like, there's shelves and shelves of Betamax tapes or whatever, that they filmed these shows. Because Van Halen, I mean, I'm sure played the Capitol Center well, they did in 80. Mm-hmm. And I think they might have done it even in 79 on Van Halen 2, and probably Fair Warning too. So like, are those shows, and even Houston, the Houston Summit, all those years that Van Halen headlined or might have even opened, maybe if they opened for Sabbath, there might be video footage that was filmed that's sitting in the can somewhere in these, and whoever owns the rights to all that footage, sure, it's just sitting there rotting away. And like, does the band have it? Is it ever going to come? Like, I wonder, because that was tremendous.
It's just like the US Festival footage. There's high quality versions of that out. There's a couple clips out there that are high quality versions of it. And I have it on VHS, of course, but there's actually super high quality pro shot versions of that out there, but they're not.
Of
US Festival?
US Festival?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah, and
I think the band probably has that.
Yeah, and I think they hated that show because everybody said that was one of their worst shows ever. And it was pretty bad.
It's pretty legendary that Roth was
pretty hammered,
shit faced that night.
And it's a funny video to watch. You got Eddie, and he's doing his solo at one point, and he messes up Cathedral, and he just looks up and like, what the hell? I just do.
Well, I think they were actually in the middle of starting to record 1984 right around then. That's right. They hadn't been on the road or done any shows for a while, so they just whipped that show together like half-assed just to get out there and play, to make the money and do the show.
Yeah.
And so they probably were very under-rehearsed.
Right, and probably a little lit when they went out on stage.
Oh, just a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, just a little
but
bit.
It is a funny show to watch. I mean, it's entertaining. I mean, and it has good moments in it, and there's parts where I like to go watch, see how he played those parts back then, and this is still in the 80s, and there's some the footage from the 78 show that's out there that one guy has. It's been upgraded 3 or 4 times.
Fresno.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
The Fresno stuff.
Yeah.
The 70 and the 79 stuff, unbelievable.
Yeah, and then there's some that slipped out. I actually had it passed to me before it slipped out, but the Portland, Oregon footage that's down close on 78, there was a.
Yeah, I think, is that on YouTube now?
Yeah, they matched it up to the audio from Fresno, but it's a different footage. And there's probably tons of that stuff out there, man. We just still haven't seen it yet.
Haven't seen it.
I just saw that Noel Monk, who passed away, and nobody knew about it last week.
Yeah.
Well, people knew about a month ago, but his estate sale happened about 2 weeks ago, a week ago. And people started talking about it, so apparently nobody knew that. But he's kept a lot of stuff, and he sold off his entire collection at one point.
Yeah,
But those guys, who knows what's where?
I wonder if he had any video or audio rarities that he was holding on to that somebody might have gotten at the estate sale. Maybe they're not.
I keep thinking, like his. Now, somebody told me the other day that his wife and his daughter were involved in the book that he put out.
Okay.
They were involved. One of them was a writer.
Okay.
And he had a writer on that with him, but apparently they were deep into that as well. And he talked to me on the side. We talked about, movie rights and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He gave up on that idea. I mean, there's a lot of politics that happens. All the rights have to be, so many people involved in that to get it done.
Yeah.
But his wife and his daughter might get it done. I think they might get that book, optioned to in a movie at some point. I think they have to go through all the hoops, like you do with Hendrix's estate. I actually met Janie Hendrix one time by pure accident.
Yeah.
And I said, I've always wanted to ask you a few questions. You got some time? And we were just happened to be sitting next to each other. And she said, sure. And I was like, when are you guys going to give somebody the rights to the music so they can put a proper movie together?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she said they were working on it with a major studio, but that it had fallen through. So
right.
At some point they will, but I just think that, it's the same thing with the Van Halen camp. They're going to have to be convinced that it's worthy. And
yeah. And the thing that sucks is if they end up doing it without any permission from anybody in the Van Halen organization, you don't want it to end up being like one of those cheesy, like where they have to use like this, like, music that recreated music. That's like, it's like super.
That's what happened. That's what happened with Hendrix on that movie they put out with, what was it guy's name? It wasn't a bad movie. All by My Side was what it was called, maybe 10 years ago. And it actually wasn't bad. It's just they had to do that. And it was terrible. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. They used that recreated type thing. And the actors were good and the story was pretty good. But
yeah,
she kind of countered that with, we've got the new Maui live video coming out, Maui concert. And we're working on all these, the documentaries and things, which there's some really great ones. I mean, come out. But I just hope that Van Halen, I don't think that maybe you're right. Maybe it's canned and we just don't know about it. One day it'll all come out. But
I wonder.
They just weren't like us in that way. Like you're talking about being an archivist. They didn't really, Eddie didn't seem to have that kind of personality that cared about hanging on things. Yeah,
I feel like he probably had like all the tapes that were in 5150 and all that stuff that he has laying around. It's kind of like he's probably got a lot. He probably had a ton of stuff that was unorganized and just in boxes, unlabeled or partially labeled, or like wasn't it. I imagine Wolf and Alex probably have a very big job ahead of them of going through all of that stuff and seeing what is actually there and what's usable and what's not, and what would Eddie actually want put out and what he would not want put out. And I mean, even going back to the rumored box set that they keep teasing us with every few years, and I know at one point I think it was like Rhino was, there was like where everybody was saying how there's going to be a box set coming out on Rhino, and it's going to be all those Warner Brothers demos from '77 and all this other stuff, outtakes and whatever. And then it just didn't happen. And I'm hoping they eventually put all that stuff out there.
I think that stuff is actually a lot closer to being able to come out than we think.
Yeah.
There's the guy that they did an interview with on Sunset Sounds channel, and I forget.
Yeah.
I can't think of the engineer's name, but anyway, he had been doing archival work for Warner Brothers, and they had gone through all of these, like the demos they did when they came into Sunset, and they did like one day blast through everything, and that's all there. So that stuff is probably just approval from happening.
Yeah, it's just got to be Alex saying, okay, I'm going to let this stuff out. And, Alex is an enigma. He doesn't really talk or say much, so who knows what's going to happen with any of that stuff. But
like Neil Peart used to be,
Yeah.
Rarely spoke. And I think he speaks less than Neil. Even Neil Peart did more interviews, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy because when you look at footage back in the day of Van Halen, especially like around the 82, 84 period, and even like when Sammy first came in, and you see interviews with them where Al was there. Al was like a joke, like he was like funny and like loud and boisterous and would joke and was kind of like, you know, he seemed like he had a lot of personality. And at somewhere along the line, it's almost like he got very stoic and very quiet and very like serious, you know. And I don't know if that is, you know, maybe back then they were all kind of drinking and having fun and partying, and that just lend itself to that sort of behavior and personality. And, you know, you grow up and you stop doing that sort of stuff or whatever. Maybe he just mellowed out. I don't know, but it's weird. But hey, whatever, you know, I'm hoping that they can put together this tribute tour thing.
Yeah, we were going to talk about that. And that's been hitting the airwaves the last two days. You know, talking about if it's going to be, you know, I think some people thought it was going to be like a new band, but I think it's just a tribute, like you saying, and that's what Satriani had said. And I like the idea of them going out and doing that. I mean, you know, they because of COVID, there wasn't any way to do anything for Eddie.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then not in a big way. And so, yeah, I think it's probably time they go, if they want to do it, go for it.
Yeah, but would you rather see a tour, or would you rather see like a big like Freddie Mercury tribute concert kind of thing, like they did?
Yeah, I mean a tour would be cool because then everybody could get a little piece of that, and you could do like you know, visuals and there's tons of visuals they could use. And I think we did one on after he passed. It just so happened after he passed, we played this venue here in town. It's our newest 1,500 seater, and it was during COVID, so it was a limited seating or whatever. But it was New Year's Eve, and I was able to put together a whole song full of visuals, a huge LED screen and everything. And I taped that. I'll send it to you so you can see it. But it was cool to be able to do it, you know. And I thought, you know, this sucks that they can't do this right now everywhere.
Yeah,
but you know, I was just such a big fan, and I had to do it. But he, for them to go out on tour, that'd be kind of cool. I mean, maybe like some people were saying like the Hendrix Experience tour kind of vibe, have different people on it, or maybe.
Yeah, I guess the challenge would be, and I think Eddie Trunk was talking about this today or yesterday. I remember him saying, the challenge of a tour would be finding enough guitar players that I guess would have an open enough schedule to be able to commit to like a tour. Like if you wanted to have like 4 or 5 different guitarists to do this instead of just 1 or 2, it's as a celebration kind of thing. Or, I mean, if it's just going to be Satriani and one other guy, that's probably doable as far as a tour goes. But if you want to have like a big rotation of like, you know, I don't know. I mean, like, I think it'd be cool to have like Satriani and Steve Lukather and like John Five and maybe George Lynch and Warren DeMartini and like any of these guys that are from like that 80s and that era where, you know, where Eddie influenced so many guys. And I'm sure a lot of them would just, you know, love to be part of something like that. But you couldn't probably carry 5 or 6 guys like that on the road for a month or two. So maybe they could do a tour and then have a big finale somewhere where they have like, you know, a bunch of different people come out and do a couple of songs and then film it, you know, or whatever. I don't know. I mean,
well, G3 used to do that a little bit. You know, they would, if they had somebody in town, whatever town they were in, they would pull up. Like in Nashville, the time I went was Yngwie. It was Yngwie, Steve Vai, and Satriani. But at the end of the night, Neil Schon was in town. He jumped up and he played, and Johnny Hyland played. They were all there. So yeah, they could do something like that where they had, you know, guests here and there, and maybe talk to them in advance or something like that. And,
now, would you like? I would like to see Michael Anthony actually just, you know, be there the whole time. I don't have anything against Jason Newsted, but it's like, no, it's got to be Michael Anthony. I
don't know why that Michael Anthony didn't even get right in the, you know, the first. I mean, I wonder still if there's not some bad blood with Alex and Michael, but Michael, I don't know, man. You met him when you were younger. I've met Michael multiple times. Damon introduced me to him, in fact, and he's a great, nice guy. I don't know what happened with that, but man.
Well, you know, the whole Sammy thing, when Sammy was out and then Mike started playing with Sammy, I just feel like Eddie and Alex have that, you know, it's that loyalty thing where they felt like he was being disloyal because he was playing with the enemy, which at the time was Sammy. Right. And it's like, guys, come on, man. Like, it's ridiculous. And what do you expect Michael Anthony to do? Sit home with his thumbs up his rear end for freaking 3 years doing nothing because you guys don't tour and you weren't doing records. Like, there was that whole period before Roth got back in the band that there was nothing going on, and Eddie was in and out of rehabs or whatever. And so, like, you know, you can't fault Michael Anthony for wanting to go out and have a good time and play songs and make some money and keep his chops up and all that other stuff, you know?
Yeah,
so
it's really hard to tell with all that stuff, what's going on in the background with those guys.
Yeah.
You know, it's always been like that, you know, and I was just hoping like this would come right out of the gate and they would do it, you know, I'm kind of split on Roth. I mean, I love Roth. I've always loved Roth, but his vocal is just so, you know, torn up. And the problem with Roth, and I saw him in 2007 and 8 when he came back, and dude, he was
me too. Yeah.
He was great, right? He was like, he was singing the melodies right, and he was vocally he was still, you know, he was still pretty good. And I thought he was kind of towing the line, you know, like the guy, the brothers might have said, "Are you okay?" But you know, on your best behavior, buddy.
Yeah. We don't want any splits off the drum riser or
whatever, you know. But I think that there was this thing that happened with him because I saw him before this on the Sammy and Dave tour.
Yeah, me too.
Which Sammy just at my show just obliviated him. I mean, it was painful to watch how much Sammy whooped his ass on this show.
Yeah,
and because he closed, and then he was so a man out of his time at that point, you know, with this whole get up, and he was still trying to be 1984 Dave or something, and it just didn't work. And then when he came back in 07 and 08, it was like somebody just magically made him a man of the time, and he was on the tunes, and he was.
Well, he cut the hair shorter. It's funny because he looks like Frazier. He looks like Niles, Frazier's brother. But he see, I saw the Sam and Dave show in Atlantic City, and I liked both of them, you know. And I got a soft spot for Dave, so I was just like, it's Dave doing Dave, you know what I mean? And I enjoyed both, you know. I was like, but if you look at it objectively, you could look at Roth and be like, you know, he looks silly trying to still do the you know, the 80s shtick in in 2000 or whatever year that was, I forget. Right. But I enjoyed it anyway. I was just like, you know, because I hadn't seen Dave for a while. I think the last time I saw him was Skyscraper. I saw Edith on Skyscraper, and then that was it. And when he came back, I was just kind of happy to see him because it was just like, you know, it had been a while. But the 2007 reunion, I think I went to 2 or 3 shows that year with the Roth reunion, and I was like, I got chills, man, because I was just, you know, even I wanted Michael to be there, and I was really bummed that he wasn't. It's nothing against Wolfie because he's just, you know, he's Eddie's kid, you know, and you know, I got nothing against him, and he did a great job, you know, and I feel like under the circumstances he freaking stepped up and killed it, you know, so props to him. But as a fan, you know, obviously I wanted Michael to be. I wanted it to be the original 4 guys, but still just going to that show, and you know, when they're breaking into like Running with the Devil and Unchained or whatever, and just looking at the crowd and the crowd singing every word at the top of their lungs. I haven't seen a crowd that into a show in like a really long time. It was just like all of us older guys and women that were from back in the day, just, you know, having a little fun, you know, like reliving the past, you know, and it was great. And you're right. Dave was fairly solid, you know, like, you know, he's not going to do the Dave scream anymore. You know, he hasn't been able to do that for you know, probably he wasn't even really doing it, you know, 10 years before that. So,
right, sure.
Yeah. But he was a little better at staying in his range. I feel like the tours after that, like when they did the 2012 tour, you know, what's the album?
Different Kind of Truth.
Different Kind of Truth. Yeah. I'm sorry, my memory's.
Right.
when they did that tour, and then they did the tour after that, and I guess it was 14 or 15. I felt like, yeah, he was. I felt like Dave's problem was if he stayed in his range, he stayed low, and because he was never a high singer, you know, I mean, he was never like super high range, but I feel like he would try to hit these notes that were just out of his reach, and he would sound really strained when he would do it. It was like, you know, like it just was out of his realm.
I always thought maybe he had some kind of problem, like where he had like a hole in his range, you know, like it seemed like he couldn't go to those notes in between, which were lower, you know. It was weird because I was like, why would you go to that note up there when you can't get it, you know? And that's above, and then that's above the note that you sang, you know what I mean?
He was trying to go even higher than what was on the records.
I know. I was like, why are you doing that?
Yeah, and he didn't have to. And I feel like that was like just a bad decision making on his part to try to hit those notes. Because if he stayed within his range, he would have sounded, you know, mostly fine. It would have sounded pretty similar to how he used to sound back in the day if he would just stay in that little window where he's best. You know,
that's what I thought. He worked within his range in 07, 08, and he sounded fine.
Yeah.
And if you had to work around a note here and there, big deal. Not everybody has to, right? Big deal. But it just like when he got to 2012, not only that, but he started really messing with the melodies a lot. And then 2015 was all over the place. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, Ed was insane in 15. I mean, he was so good at 15. And I happened to see him outside that year for the first time ever. And the sound was killer. I mean.
Nice.
So,
Al was great, too. Al was kicking on the drums, man. Like, I mean, you know, not for nothing, you know, drumming is physical and it's hard on your body, and especially doing it for years that he's done it. And for him to come out and still be solid and like, you know, like hitting hard and like being like, you know, he's not like wailing like he was when he was 25, but he kicked ass. I mean, I was just like, wow, here Al's back. Like, and hearing him play all those old songs, because, you know, I went to all the Hagar shows in the day too. And that's one thing I really missed about Al back at those shows. He was using like the electronic pads, and, you know, it just, they weren't playing the old songs. They were doing all the newer songs. So to see Al playing like Unchained again, and like in a, you know, in a Simple Rhyme, or like any of the weird off, like Romeo Delight, you know, that stuff, I'm like, wow, like just watching him play that stuff again I loved it. As a drummer, I was just like totally getting off and watching that. You know, so I enjoyed.
People always talk about Alex and Eddie's chemistry, and, you know, like one of the things that Satriani said in these discussions about this new tour or whatever it's going to be, is that once you sit down and you start to really learn these songs, you know, you start to get into the heads of these guys and what they do well and what's different about what they do. And there's this symbiotic thing, you know, people say it all the time about Alex and Eddie, but man, when you start to play these parts and really work these songs, you realize how you couldn't really stick another drummer there with Eddie, and how important Alex was to Eddie, and their sense of time and their whole thing is so unique, you know, that watching him play, you know, I talked to the guys from Guitar World about the way he plays, and he plays with a pretty heavy hand, but it sounds like he has a super light touch. It's sort of like backwards with a lot of guys from the 80s. A lot of guys were like Satriani, a lot of legato, a lot of, you know, light touch stuff. But when he would hit a note with a thin pick, though, he hit it with a lot of force. It's very different. Sounded smooth, but also he had a lot of aggression with it. And Alex had the similar quality on the drums that together, man, like when you see Eddie without Alex, it's a different thing. I mean, you've probably seen him play sitting in with, you know, some other drummers on NAMM things or whatever, and you immediately miss that thing.
Yeah, they have a chemistry, and that's a lot of it. I mean, obviously, it's just because they're brothers, and they probably have you know, there's like a mental, there's a connection he's got with his brother that's like a sibling connection. You know, like how twins have connections, and, you know, some twins can read each other's minds a little bit, and you can kind of guess where that person's going to say next, or what kind of. I feel like the two of them had that musically. You know, like they knew, each other so well. Even just in bands that I've been, when I played with a bass player for a certain amount of time or whoever, you just get to know what their habits are and where they're going to go. And, oh, I know what he's going to do next because this is just, from playing with him for so many years. You figure Eddie and Alex have been playing together since they were teenagers. So, you can't replace that. You can't just plug somebody in there and just have that. It just doesn't exist. It's chemistry. It doesn't, you can't bottle that.
One of the things that I think this sticks out when you see them play, when we were kids, there's this thing that happened with the endings of songs. I call it the big endings. And Van Halen was probably one of the bands that pioneered the big ending. I'm not sure when this started to happen, but Kiss was probably the first band to do these extended big endings, right?
Right.
All these simple parts, but very orchestrated. But when Van Halen would do them, like the end of the video in Unchained, where they do this whole long bunch of sequence of things that they play together.
Yeah.
When you sit down and you start to try to play that, you go, they are like, Hot for Teacher, the end of that. Yeah. All these crazy big climaxes that they created together, and it's they just somehow between them they just had this thing, man. And I know it's playing them together a lot, but some of the unique things that they kind of that are subtleties, things that you and I recognize, but most people probably don't.
Yeah, and it's pretty unique to them too, because like you said, like if you think about other metal bands or bands of that era, from rock bands from the late 70s and into the metal bands of the 80s and stuff, I think Van Halen influenced a lot of that sort of thing in other bands later on. Like you would see like Motley Crue do those kind of endings, you know what I mean? We're just dragging it out, where it's just like this big bombastic thing. And that I think Van Halen was like the catalyst for a lot of that stuff,
a lot of the show elements musically that they created, they carried on in all those bands. It's like the Beatles did, you hear elements of the Beatles all through all of the music that came after them. You'll hear it here and there. You'll hear a certain chord change or whatever.
Oh yeah.
I know where that one comes from.
You can't get away from it. You can't get away from it.
Everything with Van Halen, you'll hear that, those little, people don't realize how much impact those guys had, and Eddie with the guitar. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I do this, this video podcast thing is to kind of illustrate more the genius behind, what all he did in his lifetime. We with all gear changes, and this one thing that hit me in the early days was the sound of the guitar. The modern distortion that we know today. That was kind of like cuspy then. It wasn't really like there yet. This was all right now kind of distortion in 77 or 76. Foreigner, that kind of thing. Cleaner. And then he sort of ushered in this whole thing, and then Drop D. I mean, I know that Brian May did it probably before him, or someone, Jimmy Page. But with Unchained, he just sort of like, and then hear about it later, Drop D. He just started really incorporating Drop D, and then of course he came out with a tool to do it with, and then that just carried on all through, like the 7-string, drop tunings, and all the things we know today. They're like little ripples of what he did.
Yeah.
And it's those things were directly in the minds of those guys at that time. Steve Vai or whoever. They were all being influenced by him, and we in one way or the other. Yeah, there's just his influence, even if it's subconsciously. Somebody's writing a song, or somebody goes to play a riff, or goes to play something a certain way. Unless you lived under a rock and you never heard Eddie play as a guitar player, there's got to be, unless, if you're a rock oriented player, rock, metal, that sort of thing, his playing definitely has, him and Hendrix, are probably the two guys in the last, 50 years that probably had the biggest influence. I mean, there's other guys like Ritchie Blackmore and, Jimmy Page, obviously. And as far as the flashy, and the guys in Iron Maiden, and even the Thin Lizzy guys, when you listen to Thin Lizzy,
listen to like songs like Massacre or Warrior, and it's Iron Maiden. I mean, it's like if you listen to like Maiden, took that whole twin lead thing directly from Thin Lizzy. And, you know, I'm sure they're the first to admit it. You know, Steve Harris and those guys probably went to see Thin Lizzy in the 70s as teenagers and then in England all the time. But you hear that synchronized twin leads, and then you listen to a Thin Lizzy record from like 76 or 77, you're like, that's where Maiden got it from. You know what I mean? And you can hear, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. Maiden took it and made it heavy and, you know, turned it into like a metal thing. But it's funny when you hear little snippets of things in bands, and then you can, as a musician, you can hear it and you're like, oh yeah, I see where they, like, even Eddie, like some of the Van Halen stuff, a thing I find interesting is you never really hear ZZ Top listed as an influence on Van Halen, but I hear a lot of ZZ Top and Eddie riffing, especially Hot for Teacher.
Yeah,
listen to Hot for Teacher.
Somebody was saying that this morning. It was I was on Johnny Bean's podcast, and they were talking about that the boogie, the shuffle, that whole thing, that vibe. Yeah. And they didn't mention ZZ Top, but I was thinking maybe they did, but that's where
I'm the one.
That's where they got it.
That's a Billy Gibbons riff, man. Like if Billy Gibbons played that with a Les Paul through Marshall in ZZ Top on like their third record, that would be a ZZ Top song.
They were making the point. They were making the point that Joe Satriani was reflecting Eddie Van Halen in the Sacha Boogie.
Yeah,
and when really they're both reflecting ZZ Top.
Yeah, I think Billy Gibbons doesn't get the props he deserves because, like,
he definitely does.
Well, and then when you see that Van Halen used to do like Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers and like other ZZ Top songs in their cover band sets, you know, that's some of the blueprint for some of Eddie's riff writing, you know, besides the obvious, you know, the Hendrix and the other Deep Purple stuff and everything that he was, you know, I'm sure, and Clapton and everything. But when I hear some of Eddie's riffs, I definitely say to myself, that could be a Billy Gibbons riff. You know what I mean?
Well, even the artificial harmonics, you know, the squeals and harmonics that he does. You know, who was doing that first? I mean, that was probably Billy Gibbons. I mean, you know, he was pinch harmonicking way back. And even was doing the one note tapping. Eddie said that, you know, that of course people were doing that, and Billy would be one of those, or Steve Hackett was one of those guys.
Steve Hackett, yeah.
There's a lot of guys like that were doing things. But yeah, the one thing about Eddie that I had discussed along with a lot of people is that, and you probably know this if you've been doing you do the study and you're doing on the bootlegs, is that he made this transformation in 77 to 78 where he became the guy we know on Van Halen 1 with all these different techniques. Because if you listen to people below like early 77 on back, he's more of a blues-based, you know, hyper blues kind of guy. And then all of a sudden he's starting to do the we call the Eddie Van Halen scale, you know, the linear like patterns, and you hear that all happen towards the end of this one section of right before this album comes out. And it's like he sat down at one point. There was a period when they were signed and there was a gap.
Yeah.
A number of months, 6 months or so. I think Roth went and had some vocal lessons during that point. Eddie, I think, sat down and, you know, had some time, and all of a sudden they had all these cool new tricks. I mean, some of the Eddie stuff was way back, but yeah, you could hear things way back that you would hear later, but yeah, it was like it all came together.
Now, I wonder what was the catalyst for that. Like, was it intentional, or is it just a natural progression, or was he influenced by somebody that he heard around that period that made him go more in that direction? Like, you know, was it like, you know, like Michael Schenker, or was it like, you know, who was it that he might have heard, like, made him go in that more of a flashier direction? I mean, they had done the Simmons demo already, and you can hear the difference on that.
Oh yeah,
the Simmons demos that they did in '76, where he was more of a basic, like more like you said, like a bluesy rock, and he was doing some flashy stuff, but it wasn't over the top like the '77, the Templeman demos they did at Sunset later, the 25 song,
basically like the first album, but
but there was you're right, there is definitely a difference there, you know, and the difference in Roth too, like you know, like when I read the Templeman book, and you find out he did the vocal lessons and all that stuff, and you can hear the difference between Roth in '78 versus '76 and '77 was just confidence and developing the scream a little bit more, you know, like that Ian Gillan wail scream that he, you know, used to do, and learning how to stick to a melody, and like, you know, like I don't know, there was just the difference in Roth in there too was pretty drastic, I think, as far as just his, you know, his performance on the first album versus, you know, like some of the club recordings you hear from like '76 and '77.
Sure.
You know, I still liked him, but I mean, like, I still think he fit and everything, but like it just went to another level. And I guess maybe Templeman, you know,
Templeman coached him. Yeah, you know, I think Roth really respected Templeman. You know,
yeah.
I don't know, the Templeman's book went too crazy with that, but you do know that he coached him, and he produced him, so he did get their arrangements together and kind of pull those songs together. There's times when, like at the US Festival, when they're doing "Running with the Devil," that they changed the melody on the chorus. You ever notice that?
I didn't notice. It's been a while since I watched it.
They sang it differently, and I always wondered, like, is this the original version that they used to do before Templeman got involved? They changed the actual melody just a tad, and it's kind of like, what are they singing?
Yeah.
And you would hear, like, you know, you could see, because Templeman was such a talented producer, and he worked with so many vocalists and so many talented vocalists, that he could help them shape those melodies, and he had a lot to do with that, you know, and I don't think he gets all the credit that he probably deserved.
I would agree with that, because I'm a big fan of producers too, and I not just musicians, but I really like, there's certain guys that I just really like their work, you know, and like Tom Werman is one of them, and you know, Eddie Kramer, and I don't like everything Eddie Kramer's done, but there's certain key things that he's done that I think made a big difference in some records that he was on. But Templeman is one of those guys that in the '70s, you know, just had a way with making these really slick sounding records. The production, the cleanliness of the recording, all that, you know, the Doobie Brothers stuff, and even like the Nicolette Larson stuff that he did, and just it was like the beginnings of like what they call yacht rock, you know what I mean, where everything was very meticulously produced and sounded really good. But I feel like his and the Montrose record, obviously, I forgot about that.
Sure,
that was, you know, pretty much a template for Van Halen too, as far as the rock thing. But I think you're right. Ted kind of he heard the raw material that was there with these songs and what they could be. And I feel like the combination of him and Don Landy doing what they did in the studio, as far as the mixing and using the right equipment and the right mic placement and just enough echo and reverb and whatever, just made that first album. And I know Eddie wasn't a fan of the production on the first record from what I read, but
right.
I think that record is perfect as far as the sound, because it's got just enough room echo going on. It's got, you know, the ambience, and it's clean and it's in your face. And the biggest thing is it didn't sound like anything else at the time. There was literally nothing. There was no rock record that sounded like that, you know? Right. So that's a big, you know, the engineers and producers are very key, you know, to a lot of this, what you hear. You know,
and they were young guys then, so they were, you know, taking a lot of cues from them. You know, that he said, and so that, you know, I think that Ryan Cook and I had said that Van Halen is what we considered the sound of California at the time. We kind of like the Beach Boys were at one point.
Yeah,
you know, that's what you would associate the sound of California with. And then when the '80s came along, or the late '70s, that Van Halen became that thing. You know, and I think that Ted had that sensibility about him because he was from that era before, you know, and he kind of had those kind of melodies and you know,
the Southern California edge,
the clean production that you're talking about. Yeah, he had the vocal harmony thing in his head. That was one of his contributions. You know, I think that he really brought that out. He, you know, brought a lot of the vocal things out, which was really important. I mean,
he knew it sounded good on the radio too. So that was, I'm sure he had that in the back of his mind that, a song like Jamie's Crying or Running with the Devil, or even that you Really Got Me, like those harmonies were going to, and that's Michael, you know what I mean? That's that high voice, that was going to cut, through an, even through an AM, if they got played on AM radio, it was going to cut, but FM definitely was going to just be like, it's going to jump out of the speakers. I sometimes wonder, like, if it wasn't Ted Templeman who did that first record, who else at the time could have pulled that sort of result out of the band? I mean, like, I love Jack Douglas, like the stuff he did with Aerosmith and the first Cheap Trick record and, the Stars records that he did and some other stuff. But, like, I wonder if his production style would have, because he was more of a rock, like Aerosmith was a bluesy rock band. And Van Halen was a bluesy rock band, like you said, in the clubs. So I wonder if that first album would have sounded a little more like the earlier Van Halen club days if it was somebody like Jack Douglas producing it. It wouldn't have had that metallic sheen that it had because of Ted Templeman.
Well, you of course know the Gene Simmons demos. So you've heard those. And you hear these same songs, and it's like, wow, something's just totally flat about this compared to this.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's you get so used to that version of it that you can't hear it another way or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I feel like Gene, I wonder how much Gene had to do as far as actual production. Like, what did he suggest to them? Did he offer ideas? Gene doesn't strike me as the guy that would come in there and start talking about like mic placement and stuff like that. I feel like he's more of a song guy and an idea guy where, the thing with Ted Templeman was he knew his way around a board and knew how to set stuff up. And then he had Don Landy too, which he learned a lot of stuff off Don. So the two of them together produced that product, which was the combination of the right mics, the right mic placement, the right effects, and the harmonies and all that stuff and suggestions. I wonder how it seems to me like Gene just put him in a studio, funded the demo, and said, I'm just going to record you guys live, like just play like you do in the club, play your songs. I'm going to record it. Right. And maybe he, chipped some things in here and there. I don't know what, but I wonder how much he had to do with, because to me, the Simmons demos just sound like Van Halen songs were played live in the clubs at the time, but like professionally recorded.
Yeah, and one of the things that I don't know where I heard this, man, because I take so much stuff in about Van Halen nonstop. But one of the I don't know if it was one of the books I read or what, but there was this session when they did the Kiss, when Van Halen did the Kiss songs for Simmons, when he did the demos for Christine 16.
For Love Gun. Yeah.
So
Love Gun album. Yeah.
So when they were doing these. Now, the story, I don't know if I read it or somebody told me this, but David Lee Roth came down there, and they got to the solo section of Christine 16. Now, you didn't know what to play. And I don't know whether Roth took credit for this, and that's where I heard this, but he said that Roth sung him the melody.
Oh, really?
And that Eddie played that melody that you hear on that. And that, because they could, for some reason they couldn't get it, and Roth like, let me talk to him and we'll try to get something together. And then he said he just wants something simple like this, play this or whatever. Yeah. And he kind of coached Eddie on, I don't know how much he really contributed to that, but
it's possible.
That kind of says what you're saying, that Simmons may not have wasn't a producer per se.
Right.
And he was just kind of like, those guys were his session guys for those songs or whatever. But I don't know where I heard that, but that was discussed at somewhere I read that.
What's funny about that is that when Kiss recorded those songs for Love Gun and they did Christine 16, basically Gene told Ace just play what Eddie played on the demo, and Ace played it, with Ace's tone, you know what I mean? But he didn't, but you can. Yeah, it's weird. Like by default, Ace is playing maybe a riff that David Lee Roth came up with.
He was sang the melody,
Yeah,
because when I think about that solo, I think it kind of sounds like Eddie one of Eddie's things, but then again, you know, it's pretty melodic, not notey. And so,
but
so
moments.
Maybe I'm thinking, like, you know, well, yeah, I'm thinking on that particular song how melodic that solo is. That I could see a singer going, "Hey, you know, something's more simple."
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. But there's so many stories, and that's why I do this whole thing, and why I get together with folks. We talk about things and just discover the millions of things that they haven't ever told us. You know, one thing about Van Halen's, they were never that open. So there's so many things to discover that they have left behind. So we'll have lots of material to work on. I got these today in the mail. Let me show you these. These are pretty cool. These are from a photographer in L.A. These are shots of him in clubs.
Is that an Explorer or Destroyer?
That's just Destroyer before he turned it into the Shark, right?
Okay.
These are prints from the guy that took them. These are all original.
Oh, nice.
From that period in the club.
Yeah. I love those club pictures. I've been with the Strat. Yeah,
I just wanted to have some real prints of those, and they were ridiculously cheap. So I was like, oh, hell yeah, just send them on, man. Because
nice, man. That's cool.
Yeah.
I love seeing old pictures like that. I do this. I go on Google all the time, and I'm like, Van Halen 1977, Van Halen 1977, and just see like what pictures show up, because you know people are always uploading new stuff all the time, and you know I have thousands and thousands of pictures in my computer that I've downloaded off the internet. Kiss too. I mean, I must have like 2,000 Kiss pictures from like 1975, because that's like my favorite period of them from the Alive tour. And every time sometimes I'll stumble upon something like, where the hell did this come from? And you know, there's these pictures of Kiss in Wildwood from 75, and it was one of the nights they recorded for Alive, and it was in the summer of 75. And I know people that were at the show, and there was a friend of mine forwarded me a bunch of pictures that just surfaced, or that had actually they were about a year ago, I guess. They popped up on YouTube, and it's the drummer from Get the Lead Out, this guy Adam Ferrioli, who I'm friends with people that know him. I don't know him personally, but he's a local guy. And he uploaded this slideshow of all these pictures he took from Kiss from Wildwood. And the name's A. Ferrioli. My friend emailed me, and I'm like, that's the drummer from Get the Lead Out. He uploaded those pictures. And I'm like, small world, you know what I mean? But it's cool to see, like, you just stumble upon stuff, and it's like every day somebody's digging something out of their attic, or something that, you know, oh, my dad had these, or my brother had these, and you know, he's either he moved away or he passed away or whatever. And now I got some of his stuff, and I was going through it here, all these negatives of like pictures he took or whatever. You know, it's crazy.
Let me show you this right here. Let me see if I can find it. For Kiss memorabilia, you'll know this one. This is a rarity, kind of.
Oh, the comic book, yeah. I bought that when it came out. I remember
the Blood comic book, man.
Yep, with real Kiss blood.
I actually talked to my buddy that plays with Gene.
Yeah.
Apparently, that blood never got into the right batch.
Oh, really?
And it got put into Sports Illustrated or something like that.
So we were all lied to as kids.
We were. It's not actually printed in. Something else got printed in their blood.
Yeah, well, Sports Illustrated. That's hilarious.
It's in the interview that I did with Phil Schaus.
Okay.
We talk about it, and we go in. He goes into the detail because he talked to Gene, and Gene told him the whole story.
I love all that stuff, man. It's funny because all the Kiss stuff I had as a kid, I still have a decent amount of it. But I mean, like as a kid, I didn't take care of a lot of it. I ripped pictures out of magazines and put them in scrapbooks or hung them on my wall. So like in the 80s, I started rebuying a lot of the stuff as it started becoming available, and some stuff I got on eBay. But it's like, you know, you see something that you haven't seen since you were like you know 8 or 9 years old, and then you buy it again, and you're like, oh my god, it feels like yesterday that I just had this, and I'm looking through it and I remember it, you know. But I kept a lot of stuff. I used to have a Kiss pinball machine. I kind of regret. Yeah, I regret selling it, but I had it for like 3 years, and it was right around the reunion tour in 96, 97. I ended up selling it. And I regret it. I wish I still had it, you know, but I was afraid it was going to break. Something was going to go wrong with it, and I wasn't going to be able to get it fixed, and then it was going to be worthless. So I was like, it works. It's in good shape. And at the time I kind of needed the money for, I don't know, a new car or something like that. So I was like, all right. So I sold it, you know, but I regret it. But that was probably one of my prized Kiss, you know, memorabilia.
You know what? You and I grew up in you're the same age as me. So you would appreciate this. Hold on a second. I made this a few years ago just for fun. This is my
Evil Knievel.
My Evil Knievel guitar.
Nice. Does it jump Snake River if you throw it hard enough?
Probably. It's got little stars up here on the top. I mean,
that's pretty cool, man.
Little bling on the. I made that with some stuff. This is a cheap BC Rich Chinese one, but I wanted to have something for shows, you know.
Yeah.
Something different.
That's cool, man. Love it.
You know, we had all those Kiss cards, right?
Dude.
Right, and I still have some of those. And
I got some of them. Like I got like them in like card holders. You know, the first few sets.
Me too, yeah. And it's
a lot of that stuff's in my mom's basement.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I live in a small apartment, and with my girlfriend, and we had just moved into just not that long ago, about a month ago, moved into another apartment in the same complex. So like, I don't really have all my stuff hanging on the walls yet in here. Like it's kind of like I just started putting stuff up.
Right.
So my little office here isn't really fully set up yet with all my goodies, you know, and like actually 90% of what I have is in storage in my parents' basement because I just don't have the room for it in this apartment. Like I got, you know, 2,500 CDs and probably 2,000 vinyl records. And I mean, I don't know how many thousands of magazines and posters and just, it's all in boxes. And I'm going to unload a lot of it. I'm doing like a eBay clear out like of a lot of stuff, but the stuff, it means a lot to me. I'm holding on to, but I don't have a lot of room to put it out. So it's kind of sitting in storage for now, you know, but whatever, you know.
Well, we lived in, like people say, the best era of rock, man. It was a great time to be out there. And we were talking about before, you know, with all the advantages the kids have today, even, you know, they just are more distracted by a lot of those things. So we had a real focus on what we wanted to do. And
yeah,
it's so hard for these. I mean, there are a few bands like Greta Van Fleet and some other young bands that are out there, and that's cool to see. And I just seemed like there was more when we were kids, though. I mean, but that's because
well, I feel like when we were younger, and I've heard other people, I think Eddie Trunk had mentioned this too, and I agree with him about back when we were buying music as a kid and we were into music as kids. There was the record labels were actually, you know, the gatekeepers of what was good and what wasn't. You know what I mean? And you were not. Chances are, if you bought a record that was put out, you know, it's going to be at least somewhat decent quality. Maybe you're probably going to like it. You know, more than likely if it's in your field of music. And it was a bigger deal because there wasn't a whole lot of records put out. So like Epic or Polygram or whoever would only put out a certain amount of records every month. Now and it would be more focused on that. Like your attention wasn't spread out. Now it's like everybody in their basement is putting out, you know, oh, here's my new album and here's these 3 songs I just did. And, you know, everybody can record like a studio quality album in their bedroom and upload it in 5 minutes after they got done recording it. And there's no quality control. So it's like the internet is now flooded with tons and tons of stuff. And you got to really sift through a lot of times is crap just to find something that you like.
Right.
And it gets to be overwhelming. Like my attention span, like I can't, like I have to skimming through some stuff. If I hear somebody mention to me, oh, you got to check this band out, I'll check them out. You know what I mean? But I won't listen to like 20 other bands while I'm online. Like it's overwhelming to me. So I feel like for young bands that are just starting out now that want to get noticed, it's really hard for them because there's no MTV, you know, there's no, I mean, you have YouTube, but you're not a big fish in a small pond anymore. Now you're like a small fish in a huge pond and you can't get noticed because you're in competition with so many other people that are vying for everybody's attention, and people have such limited attention spans, and like it's hard to get noticed, you know. And how do you stand out? And how do you the record business doesn't even revolve around selling records anymore. If you sell 30,000 copies of your new record, that's considered like a huge success. And it's like, man, 30,000 records in 1985, you would have gotten laughed out of the freaking record company offices. You know, been like, now that's a #1 record.
Right. Back then it was 3 million. It was a good, good number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I feel like, I don't know, like there's new bands that come around every once in a while that I like. I feel jaded sometimes because I'll hear newer music and I'm like, at 52 years old, I've heard so much and I have so many records and CDs and stuff. And I've been exposed to so much stuff that it's really hard for me to hear somebody doing something now that really catches my ear. It's got to be more than just a rehash of like Guns N' Roses or AC/DC or Van Halen. There has to be another element to it that makes it interesting to me, or else I'm not that interested in it. You know what I mean? Like I'll hear stuff once in a while, a couple good songs here and there, but it's tough. Like you got to really sift through a lot of stuff to catch new stuff that you like. I feel like my favorite bands are all from the past. I hate to say it,
Well, yeah, and we tend to go back to that. The ones that are still around, and if they've got new material, Scorpions just released a new album. I got that last week.
Which one?
Scorpions. They released.
Oh, Scorpions. Yeah.
They released a new album. Brian Adams.
It's pretty good.
Brian Adams released a new album. It's pretty good. Has a Mutt track on it. Yeah, it's
okay.
He'll never be heard because he's just not. He'll be heard by his fans. People.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's not relevant anymore in today's music climate. It's just he
can travel and play gigs and make money. And,
yeah,
and that's kind of like where we're at. It's like that's why the tribute thing works. It's a live show. This is all about live music and going out there with I don't know. It's nostalgia, but I mean that's what I don't know, man. I've fought with I wouldn't say fought. I would say in my area you have a couple. You've always had this because I did original music too back in the day.
Same here.
And it's just really hard to do an original project. And when you're trying to make money at it, you've got to be able to appeal to the most average listener you have. So I'm a hits guy, man. I play the hits, and I play them from all eras. We do acoustic during the week, and I might do, Unchained Melody or something really 50s, and I might do metal on the weekend, or I might do Montrose or Kiss, or I'm all over the place. But when it comes down to my tribute show, what I got to do. I got to go out there and play them the hits. And I have a lot of, you always have your musician friends who are like critical of that kind of selling out. How it is.
Yeah.
So, you got to do what you got to do. And I play music for a living, so I'm, I don't know what to tell you, but that's a great job. And I'll do whatever I need to do that.
There's nothing wrong with that, man. And even though I don't do it for a living, I do it as a side thing because I have a regular day job as a sales rep for a food distributor. I do it on the weekends, and I like doing the tribute thing because, like, I won't be in a tribute band for a band that I don't like. Like, if I was just doing it for the money, then I would go. I mean, and I am doing it for the money because I want to make money. It's work,
sure.
Especially being a drummer. Like I'm dragging all my equipment out. Getting home at 3 o'clock in the morning, at 52 years old, it takes its toll on you. You get, it beats the shit out of you sometimes. And so, I don't, playing for free is something I did when I was 20. You know what I mean? I got bills now, and I have, I have rent, whatever. Which is
if you have the situation, like when we were younger and you didn't have all these responsibilities and you could do the original thing, which is what I did in my 20s.
Same here. I was in a bunch of different bands. In a band called Joyride. I was in a band called Christine, which that label FNA Records. It's it puts out like it put out a lot of 80s and 90s bands that were unsigned, and they track them down and they put out their demos and stuff. They put out the Christine stuff, which was a band. We were signed to Brittany Fox's management company for a little while. This is like 91, 92. And we used to open for like Kix and Brittany Fox and like Trickster and like any nationals that would come through Philly. There was a bar called the Cell Block, which these bands would play in Bensalem, PA, right outside of Philly. Yeah. So we would do a lot of those gigs, and we had, you know, a pretty decent little following or whatever. And by like 93, I guess it was 92, Mike Kelly Smith from Brittany Fox, the guitar player, produced some like a 4-song demo for us, and the management shopped it for us. And they were just like, it was right when Nirvana and Pearl Jam and everything was just, and Alice in Chains. And we were like a Kiss meets AC/DC, like street glam kind of thing, you know? And it was like 7 years too late, you know, even the record companies were like,
man. That's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. Really? We had a band. It was more like a Loverboy Journey kind of vibe, and
I dig that. Yeah,
it was the same period, 91, 92. Shopped it. We even got it on Irving Azoff's desk, and you know, this is right before all this hit, and this and it was like, go bye.
Yeah, it was like instant irrelevance, like overnight. You're like, you know, no matter what, if you were playing anything that wasn't grunge, or if you weren't like in some like Tori Amos, you know, Sarah McLachlan kind of like band, like playing that kind of like a 90s alternative or whatever.
Right.
You really couldn't get arrested. Like nobody gave two shits. And the record companies told our manager at the time, same thing. They were like, well, I think it was either Arista or Atco, one of those two, said to him, we'll give you a development deal, which basically he said to us is like, you're not going to get a video. You're going to get put in the studio. You're going to owe all the money back. And they're not going to support your record because they don't believe in this kind of music anymore. So I passed on it. Like, why, you know, like, and he's like, you're going to go into debt. You know, you're going to have to file for bankruptcy to get out of the debt or whatever he was saying to us at the time. You know, he's like, it's not even worth it. He goes, if you guys came out like in 86 or 87, like when Cinderella was just starting to happen, and, you know, Poison and Rat and all that stuff, he's like, you guys would have been signed in a heartbeat, but you're too late. You know, it's just over. Yeah. You know, and I'm sure the same thing with you with the Loverboy Journey stuff in 92. I mean, it was like,
well, you know what, the last band that was like us was Firehouse.
Yeah, okay.
That was the
they were like
kind of band we were, but we had keyboards and you know, poppy hard rock, and it, you know, it was good stuff. I had a great guy that wrote great songs, and he was young. He was a prodigy as a kid, and it's one of these kids that could write hit songs when he was 16 years old. And it just, you know, wrong music, wrong time.
Time is everything, you know. And even Firehouse just caught the tail end of that. When did the album come out? Like in 91 or something like that. 91, so,
and they just barely.
Yeah, that was. They were like one of.
Alice in Chains came on. Alice in Chains was right in there too, right? And that's when that all kind of started to go.
Yeah. And what's funny about Firehouse is my Land of Oz tribute band, we just played in Virginia Beach like about a month ago. Mm-hmm. And we played this place called Elevation 27. And the night before we played there, Firehouse played there. And they, you know, I asked the guy, I said, how'd they draw? He's like, yeah, I think they did like, you know, like 300 people or something like that. And I'm like, that's pretty damn impressive for a band that, you know, really only had like 1 or 2 hits and haven't been around for so long. And I'm like, and they're drawing 300 people in this club here. You know, I mean, you know, it's not like the Spectrum or the Garden, but I mean, like they can go out and do some club shows, and you know, a lot of these bands, and still there's a little bit of a revival interest in those bands. You know, like the Cinderellas and Brittany Foxes and Dangers and all that stuff. They can get away with doing the rock cruises and all that kind of stuff. You know? That's another maybe not for a living.
Yeah, but that's an advantage for you and I, is that since there is a nostalgia around the stuff that we played, there are those opportunities for those kind of live shows, and at kind of the pace of being able to do it on a weekend, be at home. You know, I love that. I mean, most of my stuff during the week is acoustic stuff. I don't do the stuff during the week, but I travel 2 times a month for the thing we do with the tribute around there. You know, I kind of book it all, so I make a schedule what I can handle at my
right.
But it, you know, it gives you those gigs to look forward to that aren't just your average. You know, I got to make this Monday tonight gig.
Right.
And I still have those shows that I get to kind of go back and do what I did back in '91. You know, it's weird because we dress up and all that, and
that's cool.
And the funny part is, it doesn't really feel any different. You know, the fog, all that crap. You know, except for the bombs, we didn't have any concussion motors, any of that anymore. It was a great white messed that all up for us, but
yeah. You don't want to go down that road.
Right. That was, but we were doing all that stuff in clubs back in the day. You know, it was crazy.
Yeah. We used to use confetti cannons when I was in Christine. We had these confetti cannons, and at the end of the night, the big finale of the last hit of the last song. These confetti cannons would explode, and it would put confetti all out into the crowd. And we had like light up logos and stuff. And we didn't use concussion bombs. We had like fog machine and that sort of thing. But nowadays, that's pretty much just relegated to the tribute bands.
Sure,
like we use like the Fog Jets in the Ozzy band.
Yeah.
Candelabras and stuff, and little like some visual stuff, but it's fun. And I need the Knox tribute thing. I mean, listen, if you want to pay me money to go play songs I grew up on for 2 hours, and I get to just go up and play these songs and make fairly decent money doing it on the weekends, what's the downside to that? Except, sometimes the travel's a little rough, if it's a long drive, but, and working a day job and doing that stuff on the weekends, it can be challenging because, I'm tired and I don't necessarily feel like driving 5 hours to do a gig, on a Saturday after I worked all week, but you do it, and once you do the gig and you're there and you're playing while you're on stage, it's worth it, and I couldn't do it for a living just because I wouldn't risk giving up my day job. I've had it for 20 years and I got benefits and I make reasonably good money. So I wouldn't take the risk of leaving that to do like a touring tribute band or anything like that. Cause look at COVID. I mean, that could be taken away from me in a heartbeat and then you're screwed. So I'm not willing to make that leap. So like for now, I'm just burning the candle, doing the day job thing and the tribute stuff on the weekends. But I mean, tribute stuff, depending on who it is, I'm not playing every single weekend. I do a Friday happy hour gig with a local band every Friday for the past 10 years now. Mm-hmm. So that's my vertical Friday gig. And I make, that's a good, $500-600 a month or whatever coming into the household. Just, it's an easy gig. Mm-hmm. And I love it. And it's a no brainer. The tribute stuff is like the icing on the cake, and it's nice to travel, like I got to go to Nashville and Chattanooga, and I do, the limited traveling that we do. Sometimes I'm getting to go to places I've never been to before, and if I get to see the town when I'm there, it's cool. But it's not too stressful, I mean, I might not want to do it 10 years from now, but
Steve Brown he's done a project like that too called Rubik's Cube. And
dude, not to cut you off, I saw Rubik's Cube before he was in the band way back, like maybe 2011 or 10.
Right.
It was one of the original versions of that band at Penn's Peak. And I remember seeing them and they inspired me to start an 80s band.
Oh, really? Okay.
After that, yeah. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
But they're still out there doing it, and he's doing it, and he has a great time doing it. He talked about it. He was on a while back, and we talked about that a little bit and talked about the whole 90s transition, because obviously he went through the same things we did. And it's amazing, man. It's amazing to hook up with you, man, like just randomly like this and be able to talk about the Van Halen thing and spend the evening talking about all our favorite stuff, all our favorite bands. And,
a lot of fun.
Yeah, I got my old drummer is from Pennsylvania, and I'm trying to remember from which town, but he lived up. His parents still live up there, and he's down. He moved to Florida last year. He moved down to the Gulf Coast side, but down South Florida, and he's killing it down there with his gigs. And he's full. He had an opportunity to go full time from his day job. And they made this move, and he was able to flip that and go full time again. He was full time back in the day too, But he was just tired of doing that day job, and something worked out financially, and they were able to do that. So he went back down there, went doing full time again. So it's one of those things. I've flipped back and forth over the years too. I had a job in medical sales for over 10 years, and I was coming home and playing gigs on the weekends, and did all
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
And this one thing led to another with my situation where I got to where I was busy enough with a few different bands that all of a sudden it was like, oh, wow, I could probably not do the day job thing. And then I walked off the cliff, man. And it's been 10 years or more now. So,
wow. I envy you, man. It's great. I wish I was in a position where I felt comfortable doing that. I mean, there's opportunities around here in like cover bands and bar bands during the week to do stuff like that. And like a couple of my relatives, like my one cousin plays for a living, and a lot of my friends manage to do it. You know, they don't make a ton of money, but they make a living. You know what I mean? And then they don't. I just feel like for me, it's like I need the benefits, you know, and I need as far as like, you know, for my job and just the security. I mean, at 52, I can't. You know, I've been at my job almost 20 years. I feel like, okay, if I could hang in there with this company for another till I retire, you know what I mean? I can, you know, put money in the 401k, you know, all the boring, responsible shit that we have to think about when we're our age. That creeps into my head, and I'm like, okay, I can't walk away from that.
I'm lucky that way. My wife, she carries all that stuff at her work.
Nice.
Yeah, so and then she's sort of in that position you're in, so she just got a few more years, and then she'll be retired, and you know,
that's cool.
We can decide what to do then. You know what we're going to do.
Yeah,
she keeps saying she wants to move to the beach, so I may end up down in South Florida myself.
Want to move to South Florida? Is that what you said?
I said she does.
Oh, she does.
I'm well established here in town. I'm making, you know, I'm doing all the gigs you can stand here in town.
Yeah, but you don't want to give that up.
No, I don't really, but you know, but if Mama wants to go to the beach eventually, we'll have to think about that for sure.
I'm a beach guy, so I can relate. I would love to live on a beach somewhere, even if it's the Jersey Shore, but if it's not the Jersey Shore, when I'm older, if I can split my time between Jersey and maybe somewhere down south where it's warm, you know, when it's cold up here, I'll go down south and rent a place for, you know, 4 months or whatever, and split my time between the two places so I can stay away from the cold weather as much as I can, because I hate the freaking cold weather. I can't stand it.
We were just down in we were in Key Largo about a month ago, and it's a real kind of slow pace there. It's not like even the Gulf Coast here down in Panama City and all that area is so busy and so touristy and just full of kids. Yeah, Key Largo is like the opposite.
Wow.
It's like, you know, old school Florida. It doesn't really have the beaches like you know, it's more of a dive spot than it is a beach spot.
Okay.
And that kind of thing. But it's a real slow environment, small town.
Okay.
Real chill. And we love it. We go down there, and it's a really quick drive from Miami. So you can fly into Miami cheap.
Okay.
Get a car in there in 30 minutes or 45 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. And if you wanted to go down to Key West, which is kind of like New Orleans, down at the end, you can do that too, a couple hours. But yeah, that's
cool.
I don't know, you know, you trip onto these things. I mean, it's my friend Bill that runs that store down there in Miami, Cars and Guitars. He's kind of like, you know, he's sick of Miami.
Yeah,
but but we always stop by and see him. And I don't know if you've ever seen any of the Yngwie videos of him playing in a shop in a guitar store recently.
I haven't, but is that where he does it at that guy's place?
Yeah, he's friends with Yngwie.
Your buddy?
Yeah, he's friends.
Really?
Yngwie's a regular customer of his. And he sells exotic cars in the same shop. So he sells Ferraris and old vintage Lamborghinis and stuff.
Wow.
So this is like Yngwie's home, perfect home, you know. He loves exotics and guitar.
Yeah.
So he goes and hangs out there.
That's cool. Did you ever see Yngwie like back in the day, or like?
I saw him. Let's see. The first time I saw him was probably 90, maybe 89, 90. Okay. Yeah, he was insane. You know, always been, and he's coming through here again in June, which I haven't seen him in maybe 10 years. Okay. But yeah, I've watched Yngwie since the beginning. In fact, one of the guys that was on was at his first show in America. Greg Leon, which is one of the interviews I did for this. Greg was at the show that Randy Rhoads and Eddie Van Halen played together.
Really?
Or the one show, right? At Glendale College in Los Angeles.
Wow. I didn't know about that.
Yeah,
wow.
So he was actually the guitar player in Quiet Riot after Randy Rhoads left. Okay. And so he took over when Randy went with Ozzy. Okay. And so Greg was in that group of folks there, and so he was at that show. But yeah,
Wow.
I mean, Greg's got some crazy stories about those, like the cabinets from the Van Halen tour that were unfinished.
Yeah.
Those were Chris Holmes's cabinets, and I asked him. I said, "Why were the cabinets unfinished?" And he goes, "Because they were stolen. What do you think?" So Eddie Van Halen was hauling around a bunch of stolen cabinets
from Chris Holmes.